Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are designer Felix Pfeifle and building consultant Bart Mendel. Designer historian Felix Pfeifle was born in Colorado and raised in the Central California Valley, where his family lived for 6 generations. He holds a master's in interior architecture and a bachelor in humanities from UC Berkeley. And the Berkeley bachelor's was focusing on Austro-Hungarian studies. So he also had cum laude status in that field, didn't you?
Mm.
So now, as I started reading about you more, Felix, I understood where all this background came from. You were so smart with that that you got a Fulbright fellowship. I'm sure it was in the same time when you were so involved in the Austro-Hungarian studies. And you studied in Vienna on a Fulbright, which I think Fulbrights are fantastic.
Oh, they are just dreamy.
Were you so excited to get that?
Yeah, and you know what? It's amazing the timing of this, and that we're talking about it because it was 20 years ago next week that I left.
And you got, is that right?
Yeah, it was 20 years ago this week that I left for the Fulbright in Vienna.
Fantastic.
Because I arrived a day after my birthday that month.
But you were doing all this Austrian history, Austro-Hungarian, Austrian history. Why were you so involved in that?
Well, I think Berkeley was a great place to study all manner of things, but there was an Austro-Hungarian expert at Berkeley, and there was a Habsburg expert at Berkeley, and his class was called the Habsburg Monarchy.
But how'd you decide to take those classes?
Well, I think that my interest in European history went back all the way till practically the time I was in grade school. So it was always Europe for me. It started with the Red Balloon, the movie, and the clickety clack of the shoes on the cobblestone streets.
I remember that. It was fabulous.
So and then it became it was always Europe in some way. And then as I got closer to Berkeley and in my studies at Berkeley, it became about this sort of lost Austro-Hungarian culture in Central Europe.
And so you started studying it. You got like really into it because at Pratt, you decided to change your name from Brian Pfeifle?
Yeah.
From Brian Pfeifle to Felix
Etienne Edouard Pfeifle.
And why'd you keep Pfeifle?
Well, because it was not about changing. There was no reason to change my last name. I mean, it's my family name. It was about aligning my first name identity with a world I had kind of taken on that was outside of Brian, and it was Felix, which kind of belongs to Austria.
I see. But I thought it was funny because your mother said, you don't look like a Felix, you look like a Brian to me.
Well, to her I do.
And so when you went to change your name, was it a big fanfare?
Well, no, not at all, and especially I did it in a very passive-aggressive way, I suppose, because here I had moved to New York after coming back from my Fulbright. I had gone home, and was in San Francisco for a couple years, and then I went to Pratt, and so there I am on the East Coast having that life, far enough away from my parents and my family and friends in Modesto that I could...
Modesto, right. We didn't say Modesto.
In the Central Valley.
Right.
Yeah, change my identity.
Right.
So it was a bit later that I apprised them of this.
But then, the interesting thing to me, and I think this is all in a film that's being made by Christine Beebe about Felix Austria, right?
Literally.
You inherited 100 letters from that were written by the Archduke, the Crown Prince.
Yeah, yeah.
How did that happen?
Well, I did indeed inherit this archive of letters dating from 1937 to 1994, so it's about 100 letters. It's probably actually much more.
Oh, much.
And those came by way of an article that I had written while at Berkeley as a student that was published in an historical journal, and there was this Habsburg fan, a fan of the imperial family of Austria, who read the journal and liked my article so much that he sent a letter through the editor to me.
That's how it happened?
Yeah. And so this man, Herbert Hinkle, living in retirement in Florida, Herbert Hinkle, who was a lifetime devotee of the Habsburgs and deeply, deeply a believer in the Habsburg cause and ethos.
But this was also your mindset too.
And it was my mindset, except for that I'm not a monarchist, and it's never been my notion that the Habsburgs should be restored. I mean, it's a world of interest to me, but he literally led a restoration cause to restore the Archduke to the throne.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
So he was in it a different way than you were.
Yeah, he was a little more proactive, shall we say.
Let's
in
say
his
that,
interest.
yes. So then what did you do with the letters?
So,
Here you get this box of letters.
Yeah. And by this man, whom I actually never met, we corresponded by letters.
Oh, you did at that point?
We corresponded by letters. He was in retirement in Florida. I never met him, but he died childless. And when he died, he left the letters to me in his will because he knew how deeply interested and appreciative I was of that world.
That is so amazing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
weren't you shocked?
Well, not exactly, because he put me into his will when I was in Vienna on my Fulbright.
Oh.
And it was kind of the result of, I really had the feeling in the letters between him and me that he was an elderly man who didn't have the resources to travel. And so I would write him letters from Vienna apprising him of, a beautiful day spent or evening at the opera. Or that I would go to the imperial crypt where the Habsburgs are buried and say I laid flowers at the foot of the coffin.
And tell him about it.
And tell him about it. And so at the end of that year, at the end of my Fulbright year, he sent me a letter saying that he had changed his will for me to receive those.
Oh, so you did know. You weren't completely shocked when the box came.
I wasn't completely shocked when the box
Because I was
arrived.
completely shocked when I knew that someone would send you a box of letters out of nowhere,
Right. And they were from, as you said, the last Crown Prince.
And it was a responsibility on your part to take care of those things. Those are historic documents. So did you feel a great responsibility?
Well, I did, but especially not as much toward history, the notion of history and them as historical documents, but the responsibility I felt toward Herbert Hinkle.
Oh, more to him.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
To be a custodian of his legacy.
That's interesting.
And then secondarily to history.
Well, after you got the letters, you started this journey.
Right.
And was it a journey to find Herbert?
Well,
or was it a journey to find Otto?
Otto the Archduke?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think both. I think that was it. You asked me what I did with the letters, and I really kind of sat on them for a while. It was a little difficult. There was a period in my life where I didn't know what to make of them. They were so otherworldly because, here the letters are being written in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
They must have been very formal.
Very formal and very Catholic, because
yeah.
Herbert Hinkle was Catholic, the Archduke is Catholic,
so he had
and very
this
feudal, like the languages of, very chivalric and like the liege to his master, and it's very archaic language. And it was odd to me for a while, but then I sat on them and it sort of started to resonate as a fascinating story, and I wanted to go out and discover the lies between the letters, and that was the Archduke and Herbert Hinkle.
And that was your journey? And that was your journey, and that's when you decided to make a film, or Christine Beebe your director decided to make a film about your journey?
Yeah.
Looking for him?
Yeah, looking for them.
Oh, looking for them.
The Archduke and Herbert Hinkle, who of course was dead, But I just had to go out and
But
find traces of him in the world and
of
see.
something. Yeah, I see. Of something.
Yeah.
So, how long did it take to make the film?
Well, we filmed for 6 years, and it
what's
took
it called?
7 to make it. It's called Felix Austria or Felix Austria. Yeah.
How'd you find a director?
Well, the partner of a friend of mine, and so we ran around in the same circle of friends, and it was sort of that. And she had a distinguished background from CalArts,
Right.
and I didn't know anything about filmmaking. I'm a designer, but I knew also that I wanted this on camera, and so we sort of joined forces.
So let's talk about your design. You started Office of Cultural Design, and what does that encounter? Because I called you a designer, a historian, a Fulbright scholar. I don't know. What did this Office of Cultural Design entail?
Well, it's
Were you landscaping?
yeah, I know, doing the gardening myself. I think that, I went to school for interior architecture. I trained as an architect. And then subsequently, or rather through all that, I was always doing freelance work, designing gardens, doing landscape design. So when I started my own firm, I wanted to keep it interdisciplinary, and so I called it Office of Cultural Design, and especially because I think almost our whole world is designed. The world we live in, everything is designed.
But you do it for individuals. I mean, it's a commercial endeavor.
Yeah. I have commissions and clients.
And one of the other things, you were a co-founder of Artillery.
Modern Artillery.
Modern Artillery.
Yeah.
It has to do with the opera?
Yeah. We started that 2 years ago to encourage and promote new works of opera
Is that right?
Yeah, in Los Angeles.
Oh, so you work with LA Opera? Do you work with LA Opera?
We haven't worked with them directly yet because LA Opera is kind of old school in that regard, and we're trying to do this like guerrilla. That's why we're called Modern Artillery.
Guerrilla. Who do we find who can do that?
Well, we haven't had any productions yet, so we've been looking at emerging composers that we want to profile.
How do you decide on something like that?
Well, we just scour. We scour the networks,
the people, right?
For
Schools?
all over the world.
All over the world.
Oh,
I
for new works of opera from emerging composers.
And one thing that I know, because I heard you talking the other day at First Church, which is one of my favorite places.
Isn't it a marvelous place?
I love it. I'm on the board at Pilgrim School there.
Oh, you are? I didn't know.
So I love it. But you were talking about this series of dreams that you thought you might make into animation. And the animation that Christine found for Felix Austria was fantastic.
Isn't it lovely? It's
Yes,
magical.
it is. And so could you do the same thing with your series of dreams?
Well, the animated series in the film are my dreams.
Yes.
Animated. And so I'm looking to do a children's book. I've already written it.
Yeah.
I've already written a children's book based on those dreams.
Oh, that's great.
And I'm working with the illustrator from Felix Austria, from the film, to turn it into a children's fairy tale.
That's fantastic. Now that you're a big star in your own film and you're doing your book and you're on the screen, you can say that you were with Timothy Oliphant and Jeremy Renner, who all went to the same high school in Modesto.
Yeah.
So you're one of the artists now.
One of the Bayer High School Modesto artists, of the triumvirate.
Right.
Yeah.
So thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And don't go away. We'll be right back with Bart Mendel. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. I'm here with building consultant Bart Mendel as the president of Stonemark Construction Management. Their offices are in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. He grew up in Dallas, Texas, attended the University of Texas, and he's worked as a contractor, professional for over 35 years, all over the United States and Canada. He's been in Boston, in Austin, in Montecito, and in Halifax, in the commercial and residential fields. And he'll explain all of this to us in a minute. He's very, very interested in historical restoration, as well as that classical architecture and that sacred architecture that you'll also tell us about. You're a Buddhist practitioner, and he brings this centered approach to each project. And it seems very strange to me to have someone who's on the job doing this, but I think Bart can tell us about this. You're a lecturer and a writer as well, but you seem to think people need someone like you on a construction site. What is that?
That's a great question. Well, a construction project is composed of so many moving parts. There's thousands of people, and there's different kinds of art and architecture, of course, happening. And my job is to facilitate that the vision of the architect, the design program, and the program of the client, and to try to weave that all together while being efficient and minding the budget and the schedule and taking care of what needs to be taken care of, so it all works together.
This seems like the epitome or the ultimate in specialization. Is it? Do other people do this?
Unfortunately, I have competition.
Oh, you do? So do you start, is it your construction company that's doing the work and then you come on, or are you a separate person that comes on?
I have a firm. It's a 12-person firm, and we're licensed engineers and architects on staff. And we manage the business of construction. So we will work with and hire for our clients commercial general contractors, high-end residential contractors. We hire and or manage the architects and the engineers and all the consultants and all the people that work together. We don't actually, so you could say we don't actually do anything. But what we do is we manage all of that.
Everything.
We do everything. Right.
So who comes to you? The architect or the construction company?
Well,
or the client?
Well, all three.
They do.
Of course, we work for the client, and our primary focus is to take care of the client and manage the work for them. So we're an owner's representative.
So talk about this calm in the storm. I mean, just talking about three people together now creates a storm. How do you approach these things? Is there always this storm going on?
Well, have you ever been on a construction site?
Yes, it looks like a mess.
Have you ever seen one that went awry? A construction project?
Mostly.
Have you heard horror stories?
Is that true? A lot of them?
Well, a lot more than need to, and never happens on our sites. We've never had a failure.
What goes wrong?
A lot of them are relationship based. You know, sometimes there's a technical problem, right?
Yeah.
But most construction problems, in fact, there have been studies, most construction problems, even on like public works, road and bridge projects, are relationship based.
And
Meaning
that's
that
between?
Between the contractor, the engineer, the architect, the owner.
Right.
And as things get heated up and worse, then people don't communicate, and then you have claims and the thing falls apart.
So you're kind of, and this is my own interpretation from what you're saying, a mediator at that point.
Very much. I call myself the staff psychiatrist.
Before they go to the mediation, right? You're mediating before they get to mediation.
My wife says that, you know, when you have these really ultra high-end homes, the 20,000 square foot homes that we manage for our, you know, high-end clients.
Build, we're only talking
from
about
the ground up, Well, and on those projects you have the, you know, very high-end architects, well-known interior designers, clients who have a lot of money and they've been very successful in what they do. And so we call it the Battle of the Titans. And, you know, and so they each of them has very strong feelings
and
about
ideas,
what they need.
right?
And they have to be balanced. We have to keep them all working together so they don't kill each other.
That's pretty interesting. How'd you get into construction and not into psychotherapy?
Well, I don't know. I guess I'm kind of It's a good, maybe I made the wrong choice.
Maybe you have a new career.
There's still time.
You have a new career.
Yeah, exactly.
Was your family in construction?
No, my father was a doctor, you know, upper middle class Jewish family in Dallas, Texas. And I started, what really happened to me, I became interested in both Buddhism, spirituality, and construction at the same time in the same place.
Oh, well, then they should go together.
Yeah, I lived in a Buddhist meditation center and concurrently got on the building crew and learned the business of building and the business of meditation at the same time.
Well, that brings me to my next question. How do you apply that Buddhist belief or spirituality to what's going on?
That's another really good question. I think, to me, Buddhism isn't a religion. It's not about a belief system or a higher being or anything like that. It's about how you live your life in an ethical way and how you really work with and help other people. And so there's a sense of calm, of course, that comes from meditation practice, and a sense of being able to listen to what other people are saying. And so I tell people that I'm multilingual. I speak contractor, I speak architect, I speak building inspector, I speak
What about dirt mover?
Absolutely,
Tractor
the grading
mover,
contractor.
right.
They're all speaking English, but they're not always communicating with each other. So to be able to listen and really hear what people are saying, I mean, it kind of gives you
Is that the idea? That's the
Yeah.
practice?
I
so to
think
speak?
so. I mean, I think that's part of it. And really being able to listen to what other people are saying. I mean, I think that's helpful in any business. It's particularly helpful in mine.
You've worked with Mr. Appleton, a renowned architect. You've worked with Mr. Shubin. What do they have the same ideas in architecture?
Well,
or
they're kind of polar opposites in terms of style.
That's what I meant.
Mark is, of course,
Mark Appleton.
Mark Appleton, who I respect greatly. He's a real artist, and he's a classical architect. And Russell is much more highly contemporary.
Mr. Shubin,
Yeah.
Russell Shubin, is more contemporary.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to look at those, even though it might not be your taste. It doesn't have to be your taste,
I don't
guess.
think, the homes that I build
Right.
are definitely not my taste.
So
I'm
you
much
see-
more modest than
I
that.
see, I see.
But, so our process is not specific to the art form of the architecture. The practice of getting the best out of the team works whether it's contemporary
Okay.
or traditional.
So you do a lot of historic projects too.
We do that as well,
And
yes.
classical construction and sacred construction.
Yes.
You've talked about residential. We haven't talked, do you call these commercial probably? These
Well,
classical?
Well, classical architecture, it can be applied to any type of building. I was thinking more like Mark Appleton does classical
Right,
architecture for
that's-
high-end residential.
Right. I was thinking more of historic. I was thinking, say, the Reagan Library or
Right.
whatever.
We worked on the
museum.
Reagan Ranch Museum, not
Right.
the library. And that was a historic property. I would call that barely historic, to be frank with you. It was a 1920s building. It was like a storage building in Santa Barbara near the railroad tracks, and it's board-formed concrete.
But it was something that's historic,
Well,
right?
the city of Santa Barbara thinks that everything's
Yeah.
historic.
Right.
But it was a warehouse, and so it turned out to be a beautiful building. But what we had to do to save the historic facade was kind of
Well,
ridiculous.
then talk about sacred architecture, Lady of Sorrows.
Our Lady of Sorrows Church is one of our first.
Oh, that was in Santa Barbara. Yeah,
Yeah.
so what did you have to do to save that?
Well, it was a 1920s church, also Catholic church. We do a lot of churches for the Archdiocese of Los
Oh,
Angeles.
so what do? You go in and manage the same way?
Well, it's the same process. Again, it isn't specific to the architecture or the type of building, but it's the process of bringing out the best in people and creating that kind of efficiency and cost savings and shortening schedules, because that's important on any project. So when we show these beautiful pictures on our website about these projects that we've done, I can't claim they have anything to do with how beautiful they look, but I can claim that they happened because of us.
I mean, they actually
They
were
actually
restored
happened.
and they they came
And,
about.
Yeah,
right.
it actually happened.
So, but you do have an interest in that type
very
of
much so.
architecture because you're sitting
Yes.
on boards.
Yes, I'm on the board of Institute of Classical Art
Right.
and Architecture here in LA.
And
it's
that's
a
to
wonderful
save,
organization.
right? To
It's
save?
an educational organization to promote classical architecture because that isn't really what's taught in schools now. It's much more contemporary. And so a lot of people feel like the classical arts are kind of being lost.
One of the things before we leave was your Zen top 10 list that they're called Zenzingers, I think. I got this long list and I thought, oh my gosh, how does he do all of these things? Do you have a couple off the top of your head?
I don't know that I can actually remember them, but I can.
It's like your application to the project, right?
Yes.
Would be your Zenzinger.
I can tell you, I can't actually remember one.
You can't even remember
I can't
one?
even
Come
remember
on.
one. I mean, I can remember the idea. Like, for
Yes.
example, don't use the cheapest bid. Don't always use the cheapest bid.
Yeah, I think that's what they were. Yeah.
And so the idea is that, you get what you pay for. Everybody knows that, right? And so if you see a bid that's too low for concrete, it is too low.
So you come in and advise them?
Of
You
course.
advise them on that?
Yeah.
I see.
And just trying to maintain harmony on a job site, and there's so many factors. Of course, if cost is over exaggerated, if it's always the cheapest bid, then you're going to get really poor quality. Because quality and cost and schedule, they're all competing.
I think everything you said today was from that list of Zen singers.
Well, yeah,
I think it was.
You got the condensed version.
Because you talked about being friendly, getting people to talk the same language, and all those things. Those were all part of the Zingers.
Absolutely.
And I thank you so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bart. And you keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. And keep emailing JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.